Good afternoon, distinguished delegates. I now declare open the 968th meeting of the Legal Subcommittee of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. Distinguished delegates, this afternoon we will begin our consideration of Agenda Item 8, national legislation relevant to the peaceful exploration and use of outer space. Agenda Item 9, capacity building in space law. And Agenda Item 11, general exchange of information and views on legal mechanisms relating to space debris mitigation and remediation measures. taking into account the work of the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee. After the adjournment of the plenary meeting this afternoon, the Working Group on the Status and Application of the 5 United Nations Treaties on Outer Space will hold its 8th meeting. Distinguished delegates, I would now like to begin our consideration of item 8 of our agenda, national legislation relevant to the peaceful exploration and use of outer space. The first speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Japan.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, on behalf of the Japanese government, I am pleased to address the 57th session of the Legal Subcommittee of COPUOS. Mr. Chairman, with regard to national legislation relevant to the peaceful exploration and use of outer space, Japan established the Basic Space Law in 2008. The law requires space development and utilization to be carried out pursuant to the treaties and other international agreements on space development and utilization. According to the law, Japan formulates and publishes the basic plan on space policy and its implementation schedule. The schedule is planned to be revised every year, and Japan recently issued the latest version in last December. This schedule enables for private entities to foresee the governmental plan, such as satellite manufacturing and launching, and this also can contribute to the enhancement on transparency and confidence building in the international community. Mr. Chairman, 2 laws regarding commercial space activities and remote sensing data utilization enacted respectively in 2016. The Space Activities Act has established a system of governmental authorization for commercial launch and control of satellites, and compensation schemes regarding third-party liability for damage caused by commercial launches in order to ensure accurate and smooth implementation of UN outer space treaties, to ensure public safety, and to contribute to enhance welfare of human as well as economy and society. The Act and related orders will come into effect in November 2018. The Act on ensuring appropriate handling of satellite remote sensing data has established a licensing regime for using satellites remote sensing systems and address necessary measures with respect to restrictions associated with satellite data in order to ensure the adequacy of using systems of satellite remote sensing and adequacy of handling data derived from this system. The Act and related orders came into effect in November 2017. With the increase of non-governmental entities engaged in space activities, it is essential for governments to ensure appropriate use of outer space by these entities in accordance with international laws. It is also very important to promote these commercial activities by setting up rational standards as well as to deal with safety and security concerns appropriately. Japanese government is willing to address these challenges by formulating these laws. Thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the distinguished representative of Japan for his statement. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Indonesia has promulgated several laws related to the peaceful uses of outer space, such as Law Number 36 of 1999 concerning telecommunication and Law Number 21 of 2013 concerning outer space. The law of the Republic of Indonesia number 21 of 2013 on outer space has determined that the national space activities include space science, remote sensing, mastery of space technology, space launch, commercial activities. In the framework of the implementation of such activities, the Presidential Regulation number 45, year 2017, on the Master Plan for the Implementation of Space Activities 2016 until 2040 has been enacted, which contains the vision and mission of the implementation of space activities, such as policy and strategy of implementation of space activities, as well as the short, medium, and long-term strategic plan map. Indonesia is also currently preparing the draft of government regulation on the remote sensing activities as a technical implementing regulation of Article 23 of the Law number 21 of 2013 on outer space that will be signed by the President of Indonesia in the near future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Indonesia for her statement. And the next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Mr. Chairman and distinguished delegates, the entry of multiple actors in outer space activities, including the public and private sectors, as well as multinational governmental and non-governmental entities in space research and development, manufacturing, launch, operations, and marketing has necessitated the development of space policies, laws, and regulations both at the national and the international level. While the increasing number of actors can be a positive development as far as advancement in space activities is concerned, it remains the responsibility of states to ensure that the activities in the outer space are peaceful and not prejudicial to the accepted international norms of state sovereignty and national security. Realizing the importance of national space policy and legislation, Pakistan is actively engaged with the multiple mechanisms and processes such as the legal subcommittee of the COPUOS, in addition to the seminars, conferences, education, and training in the field of space law and policy. Pakistan appreciates regular exchange of information in regular activities and development in the area of space laws and regular framework, and appreciates the initiative of the legal subcommittee. In this regard, we welcome the activities of advanced spacefaring actors in promoting the understanding of space laws and policies. The formulation of national space policy and enactment of necessary space laws and regulations are being actively pursued by Pakistan, with the aim to meet domestic needs and contribute to the international requirements, such as disaster management, mitigation and reduction, navigation, food security, water resources management, environmental protection. Pakistan's pursuit reflects its commitment to promoting and implementing the 5 UN national treaties in outer space, as well as its endeavor to ensure long-term sustainability of the outer space activities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Pakistan for his statement, and I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Australia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me again join with other delegations in congratulating you on your election as chair, and I'm sure that under your guidance and leadership, the subcommittee will continue with its important work in the most appropriate way possible, and my delegation will offer you its ongoing support in that regard. We would also again like to express our thanks to Director DePipo of the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs and to the UNUSA Secretariat, so ably led by Nicholas Hedman. Chair, I would like to take this opportunity to update the Legal Subcommittee on recent developments in relation to Australia's national space legislation, which involves reform of the legislation, the Space Activities Act 1998. Chair, on the 24th of October 2015,
the then Minister for Industry, Innovation and Science, the Honourable Christopher Pyne MP, announced that the Australian Government would undertake a review of Australia's national space legislation, the Space Activities Act 1998, incorporating consultation with Australian state and territory governments, researchers, industry and the Australian public. The government sought to review the legislation governing civil space activities in Australia in order to ensure that it appropriately balanced Australia's international obligations with encouraging industry innovation and entrepreneurship, and that it helps to ensure that the sector keeps pace with international change and technological developments without adding unnecessary impediments to private investment. Chair, the terms of reference of this review examined the appropriateness and effectiveness of the existing Australian civil space regulations, including whether the Space Activities Act 1998-1 supports innovation and the advancement of space technologies. 2, promotes entrepreneurship and private investment in Australia, as well as opportunities for Australian firms to compete globally into the future. 3, appropriately protects the Commonwealth of Australia against potential liability claims in relation to current and future civil space activities conducted in Australia or by Australians. 4, adequately addresses emerging issues such as management of the space environment and technology advancement or convergence. 5, appropriately aligns with other Australian legislation and or Australia's international obligations and removes unnecessary regulatory burdens. And 6, for government only, provides the necessary authority to support Commonwealth-led civil space activities. Mr. Chair, the review involved a series of stages involving government, private and public consultation both nationally and internationally, written submissions from stakeholders in response to an issue paper, over 80 of which were received, and a stakeholder forum at Parliament House. As part of the review process, I was commissioned by the government to provide an analysis report on these public submissions, which I completed in August 2016. This report has subsequently been publicly released. Since then, the Australian Government has undertaken additional consultations and released a legislative proposals paper which sets out a range of options for reform to the Space Activities Act 1998. Amongst the reforms of the legislation currently under consideration by the Australian Government are the following. 1, that the objects of the legislation be streamlined to emphasise appropriately balancing risk and Australian benefit, including a focus on Australia's international obligations and the establishment of a system of regulation for those activities. 2, that a licence type to authorise payloads be introduced. 3, that requirements currently outlined in the Space Activities Regulations 2001, which are more relevant to launch rather than establishment of a launch facility, be transferred to the proposed new Australian Launch Permit Licence. 4, that a high-level statement committing applicants to consider the space environment be considered. And 5, proposals for possible changes in relation to fees and insurance. Mr. Chair, my understanding is that the Australian Government is considering its preferred options and has indicated that a Bill of Amendments to the Space Activities Act 1998 should be introduced to Parliament in the near future. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Australia for his statement. Are there any other delegations wishing to speak on this agenda item at this meeting? I recognize the distinguished representative of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon for all.
The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, after a number of years of participating in the COPUOS sessions, including its two subsidiary bodies, the LSC and the STSC, and after having signed outer space-related treaties, UN treaties, has proceeded with the promulgation of its national legislations on the exploration of outer space and the peaceful uses thereof. We wish to clarify that states in their legislations, national legislations, need to keep abreast with UN outer space treaties in full compliance with those, and that they should promulgate such national legislations governing commercial activities in the outer space on an equal footing amongst all states. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Saudi Arabia for his statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, as we have already stated in our general intervention this morning, Greece is strongly committed to the work of the Legal Subcommittee, this unique legal forum where all important issues of international space law are discussed. We strongly believe that the 5 United Nations treaties on outer space and the relevant UN General Assembly sets of principles constitute the cornerstone of international space law, and as a consequence, we attach great importance to their implementation. Space operations and the regulation of space activities are of primordial interest to our country, which, together with being party to the existing space treaties, is a state member of the European Space Agency. Very recently, our country has undertaken major steps in the field of space, including satellite communications and space applications. In this context, Greece has taken the necessary steps at the national level in order to create a solid legislative framework which corresponds to its international engagements in terms of space law and applications. Allow me to give you a short insight of our country's latest legislative endeavours in the space sector. In December 2017, a new law was enacted, Law 4508 of 2017, which contains provisions and regulates issues such as the authorization of space activities, the registration of space objects, the licensing terms and procedure for space applications in Greece, the international liability for damages caused by space objects, the supervision of space activities, and the establishment and keeping of a national register for the registering of space objects. Most importantly, the new law establishes the Hellenic Space Agency, whose main task is to strengthen the bonds between the national space sector, academic institutions and the private sector towards the development of digital economy in our country. The Hellenic Space Agency is also intended to ensure maximum support on space and satellite initiatives and promote the existing space strategy. I will not get into further details due to time constraints. In concluding, allow me, Mr. Chairman, to add that the new legislation provides for the establishment of a business incubation centre with the contribution of ESA in order to boost Greek start-ups that are involved in space activities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Greece for her statement. Are there any further requests for the floor? I see none. We will therefore continue our consideration of Agenda Item 8, national legislation relevant to the peaceful exploration and use of outer space, tomorrow morning. Distinguished delegates, I would now like to begin our consideration of Agenda Item 9, capacity building in space law. I will turn now to our list of speakers, and the first speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Nigeria, who will speak on behalf of G77 and China.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to ask a question. Is it agenda item 9? Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, the Group of 77 and China considers that with the increasing number of states involved in space activities, the need for effective laws and policies on space activities, not just on an international level, but also on the national level, is becoming more and more apparent. One of the pillars that support the development of legal and policy frameworks at the national level is the availability of professionals able to provide services in that field. Capacity building, training, and education in space law helps to promote international development and cooperation in space activities and helps build national expertise and capacity in countries with emerging space capabilities. It also provides the means for a better understanding of the interdependent roles of science, technology, and law in space activities. In this connection, the group believes that the successful implementation and application of the international legal framework governing space activities will depend on the understanding and acceptance by policymakers and decision makers of the legal framework governing the conduct of space activities. The presence of suitable professionals, in particular in developing countries, who are able to provide legal advice and disseminate information and knowledge relating to space law is therefore dependent on adequate opportunities for education in space law and policy. In this regard, the group recalls the United Nations workshop on space on the theme Contribution of Space Law and Policy to Space Governance and Space Security in the 21st Century, held in Vienna from 5th to 8th of September 2016. In this regard, the group highlights the observation by the workshop that in view of the growing number of benefits derived from space science and technology applications and the continued expansion of space activities, greater attention should be paid to national regulatory and policy development, in particular for the benefit of developing countries. In this context, it was important to observe the role of an interaction with technical bodies and institutions at the national, regional, and international levels. Mr. Chair, the group reiterates its view on the role that the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space and its subsidiary bodies have a unique common platform for strengthening the capacity of states, in particular developing countries, in the use and application of space science and technology for sustainable development, and in efforts to enhance the long-term sustainability of outer space activities. In this line, the group supports the recommendation made by the workshop regarding the encouragement of the Office of Outer Space to conduct targeted capacity building, education and training in space law and policy, building upon the UN SPIDER program with the objective of establishing capacity building platform on the basis of the following criteria: the need to determine the capacity within the office to provide targeted technical legal assistance and conduct a comprehensive assessment of the needs of requesting states, taking into account judicial, administrative, and technical requirements, and on that basis determine the assistance required, and B, the delivery of the required capacity building assistance, training, and education activities to meet the needs of states. Mr. Chair, to this end, the group emphasizes the importance of strengthening the mandates of the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space and its subcommittees and the Office of Outer Space Affairs, and welcomes the consideration of ways to reprioritize resources by the Secretary General in this regard. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Nigeria for his statement on behalf of Group 77 and China. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Germany.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, Germany attaches great importance to capacity building in space law. As the number of actors in outer space continues to increase, the dissemination of knowledge of the relevant legal framework becomes ever important. Capacity building in space law is a significant means of strengthening the rule of international space law and a prerequisite to effective global governance of space activities. Germany therefore welcomes any initiative of member states, of research and educational institutions and other civil society actors, and of UNOSA that enhance the access to and develop the understanding of national as well as international legal and regulatory frameworks of space activities. This year, Germany submitted 2 additions to UNOSA's Directory of Education Opportunities in Space Law. We notified that at the University of Cologne, the Institute of Air and Space Law now offers a master program on public, air and space law. The Institute also provides students with the opportunity to conduct PhD studies on air and space law in German and in English. Also, in 2017, Professor Stefan Hobe of the University of Cologne, together with a distinguished colleague from the University Paris-Sud, published a volume entitled 50 Years of Space Law in 50 Years, under the auspices of the Hague Academy of International Law. Germany further believes that access to and the distribution of knowledge in the area of space law and policy is a prerequisite for the successful work of this committee with regards to assessing the status of space law and developing it. As we monitor and discuss the practice of member states with regard to peaceful uses of outer space, our exchange of views relies on access to the relevant legal and policy instruments, especially at the national level. Therefore, Germany appreciates the recent publication of several comprehensive compilations of national legislation and administrative acts, along with their translations, that make their content available to the international community. Mr. Chairman, bearing in mind that this year's session is convened under the banner of Unispace Plus 50, Germany fully supports the efforts of the Working Group on the 5 United Nations Space Treaties under Thematic Priority 2 to develop a guidance document to be issued by the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space with essential information on the state of affairs of the legal regime governing outer space, including relevant instruments applied through national regulatory frameworks and international mechanisms for cooperation. By 2020, this document will serve as valuable guidance for states wishing to become a party to the UN treaties on outer space. We invite all delegations to support the work on the key issues of this guidance document and the affiliated online tool during this session. Moreover, Germany welcomes the report outlining the Office's strategy under Thematic Priority 7 towards strengthening capacity building for the 21st century as a fundamental pillar of the Space 2030 agenda. Germany is committed to the objectives of Thematic Priority 7. Firstly, to define innovative and effective approaches to overall capacity building and development needs as a fundamental pillar of global space governance. Secondly, to strengthen capacity building and outreach activities of the Office of Outer Space Affairs. Thirdly, to develop infrastructure for cross-sectoral and integrated applications with combined scientific, technical, legal and policy outputs. Fourthly, to enhance existing partnerships and to forge new ones to strengthen and to deliver targeted capacity building and technical advisory activities based on needs assessment. And fifthly, to promote efforts to encourage science, technology, engineering and mathematics education, especially for women in developing countries. Let me stress once again the importance Germany attaches to capacity building activities and the technical assistance missions in the field of international space law and space technologies conducted by UNOSA, UN SPIDER, and the regional centers of space law and technology education affiliated with UNOSA. Germany also welcomes the initiative to establish a new regional outreach center for the Russian-speaking community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Germany for his statement. And the next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of China.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, capacity building in space law contributes to the orderly conduct of outer space activities under law to maintaining outer space environment and order. and to equal participation of countries in international cooperation and the sharing of space benefits. Capacity building in space law has always been an integral component of Chinese space development policy, and the Chinese government has been actively improving its domestic legal framework, stepping up academic research in space law, and engaged in international cooperation. In terms of domestic legislation, formulation of China's space law has been carried out extensively, with in-depth research and review, and the first draft and supporting reports have been put in place. Meanwhile, the review and drafting of satellite navigation regulation went in full gear in 2017. China will keep up the momentum in the legislation process, rigorously adjust, regulate, and supervise all its space activities, and fulfill its obligations under international treaties. When it comes to academic research, relevant government departments encourage and give guidance to entities concerned in theoretic research on space law and promote its effective implementation. The Space Law Center of China's National Space Administration, established in 2017, will further enhance China's capacity and institution building in space law research. The China Institute of Space Law, serving as a platform, has promoted research, education, and communication in space law by facilitating research projects, publications, international space law moot court, and academic exchanges. To enhance the space law education and dissemination, and therefore we have set up institutes and built up expert teams in space law. As for international cooperation, the UN-affiliated Regional Center for Space Science and Technology Education in Asia and Pacific in China, hosted by Beihang University, is actively providing space law training programs to developing countries. This January, 3 graduate students in the first master's program in space law and policy graduated and successfully obtained their diplomas. The center will continue to enroll foreign candidates in this program, boost education and research in space technology and law, and develop expertise in this field. The Chinese government supports the initiative by the center to set up the Alliance of Regional Centers for Space Science and Technology Education, with the conviction that the alliance is conducive to resource optimization, mutual support, and closer cooperation and exchanges among countries in space law. On July 10, 2017, Harbin Institute of Technology co-hosted with APSCO and McGill University of Canada the 4th Space Law and Policy Forum in Harbin. The forum gathered experts and scholars from the US, Canada, Japan, Italy, Turkey, Thailand, Bangladesh, Iran, and Peru, among other countries, with the presence of Mr. Nicholas Hetman from UN-USA, where they had substantive discussions under the theme of satellite utilization and space law development. Mr. Chairman, the Chinese government reiterates its support to COPUOS and UN-USA in playing their role in guiding space law capacity building. Unispace Plus 50, to be held in June, will be a milestone for the UN in this century on the peaceful use of outer space. Capacity building and the legal regime of outer space and global governance are two of the thematic priorities for Unispace Plus 50. The Chinese government looks forward to working with all parties, seizing the important occasion of the Unispace Plus 50 to achieve wider consensus, closer cooperation, and further capacity building in space law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of China for her statement. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Indonesia associates itself with the statement made by the Group of 77 and China and wishes to add the following statement in its national capacity. Indonesia supports capacity building in space law and reiterates the importance of sustainable capacity building in the field of outer space, especially for the developing countries. On that note, it is important for the developing countries to gain access to the transfer of technology from spacefaring nations in order to develop their capacity in outer space activities. International cooperation is important not only through training, education, and technical assistance, but also in supporting the effort to develop an outer space regime and to overcome the complexity of issues that may arise in the future. In this regard, Indonesia has participated as one of the trainers of the APSCO training course of space law and policy held in Harbin Institute on 4 until 8 July 2017. We would like to thank APSCO for inviting our scholar to be one of the trainers in this training. Several universities in Indonesia are also involved in space law education through participating in the Asia-Pacific round of Manfred Lech moot court competition on space law cases. Moreover, for speeding up space law education in Indonesia, the Law Faculty of Atmajaya Catholic University in Indonesia, in Jakarta, is currently preparing 4 modules for capacity building in space law, based on United Nations Space Law Education curriculum. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Indonesia for his statement. And the next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chairman and distinguished delegates, the evolving legal regime based on the Outer Space Treaties needs knowledge and understanding of space law for effective implementation. Capacity building in this area of space law, including knowledge of international as well as national space laws and policies, is not only indispensable for initiation, operation, and enhancement of outer space activities, but also for determining the future course of activities in the outer space. Capacity building, training, and education in space law not only promote international cooperation in outer space activities, but also help in building national expertise and capacities of the emerging spacefaring nations. Better understanding of the independent roles of science, technology, applications, and law in outer space activities contribute to the development of national space regulatory and policy frameworks. Mr. Chairman, in 2018, 2 officials from the Space Agency of Pakistan completed their master's degree program in space law and policy, and 3 more shall undergo the same later this year at Beihang University, China, in cooperation with Regional Center for Space Science and Technology Education for Asia and the Pacific, which is affiliated with the United Nations and Asia Pacific Regional Space Agency Forum. During 2017, the Institute of Space Technology in Pakistan organized an international conference on aerospace science and engineering, in which a complete session was dedicated to the space law and policy. Pakistan has been organizing biannually a high-level international conference on space since 2012, with a dedicated session on space law and policy involving renowned experts from the world for panel discussions. Pakistan supports keeping capacity building in space law as a standing agenda item in the legal subcommittee to address the emerging requirements owing to the technological developments and increase in its stakeholders, as well as for strengthening space law education at the national, regional, and global levels that would lead to better awareness amongst the public as well as private stakeholders. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Pakistan for his statement, and the next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Chile.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chairman. With regards to fostering capacity building in space law, our delegation would like to acknowledge and thank UN-USA through its training program in space law, which promotes the understanding, acceptance, and implementation of UN treaties and principles on outer space. I would like to highlight that in the future, Chile would appreciate this program being focused on issues which are not very much debated in countries such as ours, such as a legal discussion on the definition and delimitation of outer space, or questions relative to the character and utilization of geostationary orbit, including consideration of ways to guarantee their rational use and more knowledge of the role of ITU. These subjects have been on the agenda of this subcommittee for a long time, but they have become increasingly relevant as space activity increases with more stakeholders, including the private sector, and we need more legal knowledge on these subjects. We would like you to take into consideration an activity in our region under the auspices of USA or the International Civil Aviation Authority and governments of our region to build capacity in space law with regards to emerging challenges to new uses of airspace, orbital space, suborbital spaces would be truly appreciated, especially by developing countries. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Chile for her statement. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of the United Arab Emirates.
سيد الرئيس المندوبين الموقرين اسمحوا لي.
Mr. Chairperson, distinguished delegates, I'd like to begin by congratulating you, Mr. Chairperson, on your election to chair this legal subcommittee. And we would like to express our gratitude to COPUOS and to UN-USA for having organised this meeting. I'd like to raise two matters, namely the role of policy or politics and the role of space in the UAE, and then also activities that seek to build space expertise. The relevant legislation in my country stipulates that all government bodies and private bodies involved in space activities must step up their efforts in order to implement programs that would lead to greater involvement of students in science, technology, space law, and space technologies. The aim is to bring students and researchers on board and to encourage study of this sector. We're also looking to promote the participation of Emirati women in the space sector. One of the aims of our space sector is to carry out capacity building and to attract new people into the space sector, to increase initiatives and opportunities in the STEM area, and to build cooperation with national and international bodies in the space field. We've created a master's program on space and aerospace law. This is a university degree, and it's the first of its kind in the Middle East. The aim is to build a culture of law in the space field. And the aim is to keep abreast of developments in this area. The Masters has received approval from the Ministry of Education. It will begin in September 2018, and we are working to gain approval for it at the international level. It's open to law graduates who are interested in space law and also to experts in aerospace and space law. Admission to the course is decided on a case-by-case basis. It's a 2 to 4 year program, and it includes 33 hours of tuition probably per month, 18 obligatory, 6 optional, and then additional tuition in various areas of space law. This statement is being read at extremely high speed, says the Arabic interpreter, and therefore detail is lacking. We offer a large number of different training courses in different areas of space law. These courses seek to meet our ambition to be at the avant-garde when it comes to space law and so forth. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United Arab Emirates for her statement. And now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Argentina, who will speak on behalf of GRULAC.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, capacity building in international space law is something that COPUOS needs to strengthen. Unispace Plus 50 can be an opportunity to consider special programs for capacity building and perfecting knowledge for developing countries. Capacity building will have a very positive impact on those countries which have not yet ratified the space treaties, encouraging them to do so, as well as on those countries who are already parties to the treaties and who are implementing them and establishing the national institutions required for full compliance. The workshop organized by USA on space law is an important contribution to capacity building. The workshop, held in Vienna in September 2016, allowed for the participation of staff from the permanent missions, and this was a high-value contribution which should become standard practice in the future because it fosters a more general dissemination of the recommendations resulting from the work of this subcommittee to the competent national authorities. However, we consider that that practice should be complemented by regional workshops that identify specific areas for training, not just of scientists, experts, and public servants responsible for activities linked to the peaceful use and exploration of outer space, but also for other trainers of undergraduate and postgraduate level in order to make international space law more accessible and better known by all sectors of civil society. In recent years, new members from Latin America and the Caribbean have become members of COPUOS. This is proof that there is growing interest and participation in our region in the subjects of COPUOS, and therefore we believe that USA should support this process through providing legal training in our region. Because of this, we reiterate once again our call to USA to organize a legal training workshop in our region. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Argentina for her statement on behalf of GRULAC, and I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Regional Center for Remote Sensing of North Africa States.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to speak both about item 4 and item 9 on the agenda because this is the first time that our center addresses this session. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, allow me at the outset, and on behalf of the Regional Center for Remote Sensing of North Africa States, to express my gratitude to you personally, to the Secretariat, for the able way in which you have conducted our work and your efforts to achieve success in our meetings. And we also express our gratitude to the Director of the Office of Outer Space Activities for her continued support for these meetings in order to achieve the objectives, the principles, the humanitarian slogans upheld by this distinguished committee since it was founded. And I also express my gratitude to all the official delegations representing member states and to the various regional and international entities participating as observers. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to remind you that the Regional Center for Remote Sensing of North Africa States is a regional intergovernmental organization established by a group of states of North Africa, and last year we celebrated the 25th anniversary of our establishment. The center has been joined by other states also from the Middle East, West Asia, and Africa south of the Sahara. Through our work, through our presence here with your committee and with other committees as a permanent observers, we have continuously been keen to provide assistance to the regional states in the application of the principles of the use of outer space for peaceful purposes and to urge the nationalization and use of space technologies to develop national capacities and improve them, particularly in the management of natural resources, the study of environmental problems such as water scarcity, drought, desertification, the shrinkage of the plant cover, environmental pollution, climate change, and other problems that affect sustainable development. And in order to support these states in confronting the continued changes in the field of space science and applications at the national, regional, and international levels. As part of our international and regional cooperation and to fulfill the objectives of this committee, we have been keen to fulfill the methodology established for the member states, which consist of, on the one hand, developing national capacities through the training of scientists in member states, and on the other hand, working and cooperation and coordination in carrying out projects and studies, both theoretical and practical, in scientific fields at a bilateral or regional level in order to promote the development of the individual and the community and achieve sustainable welfare and to resolve the obstacles in confronting the implementation of these objectives and because of the benefits that can be derived from the regional and international framework. Through our efforts to build the autonomous capacities of the member states and with regional and international cooperation. Over the past 3 years, we have trained a number of participants within our member states and outside, with a total of nearly 450 trainees in various scientific, technical, and legal fields. And we have also sought to train a number of specialists and assist them in obtaining the master's degrees, and some have also obtained the PhDs, and we have worked through our strategy to implement a number of important projects, including creating a model regional law for space for the guidance of member states in creating their national laws. This helps encourage member states to pay attention to the space law and regulations, and so therefore over the past year we have discussed a project to create a draft model regional law, space law, for the guidance of member states, and we have held we have held a meeting last May in Egypt in 2017 that was attended by a number of specialists. This project is going to continue and will be presented in the next meeting of the experts to be held in Cairo at the beginning of next month, which will coincide with holding a workshop for training in the sources of international law and its relation to regional states. Already a number of experts have been nominated to participate in that workshop. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, international cooperation is among the main focus areas of our center. Over the past 2 years, we have signed a number of memoranda of understanding with Arab and regional and international organizations and unions, as well as a number of international companies specializing in space technologies, as well as regional and international training centers, in order to provide the necessary regional and international political umbrella for our joint efforts. We have also participated and continue to participate in organizing and holding a number of international conferences and workshops, including, most importantly, an international conference to be held this year on advanced geospatial science and technology. It will be held in September in the city of Tunis and will cover all areas of expertise, relevant areas of expertise, including international space law and state strategies in this subject. A number of well-known experts will participate in this conference. And this occasion, we issue this invitation to all of you and to all international and regional scientific and academic establishments, as well as to specialized companies to participate in this conference. We also invite countries who would like to develop their expertise and abilities in these scientific fields. You can visit our website, www.teangeo.org. We have also placed announcements about this upcoming conference on relevant international websites, and you can review the planned activities and take an overview of the programs and activities of our center at our own website, www.crtean.org.tn. In conclusion, our center looks to the international community to receive more cooperation and support from your committee in order to develop our regional states who are most in need of this technology to develop their national capacities, now that they are going through some of the most difficult demographic developments and illegal migration, which have affected us greatly, as well as they have affected South Europe. We renew our gratitude to all of you and to the members and chairs of delegations and regional groups for all their efforts that have great influence on the public. And I thank you for your attention.
I thank the distinguished representative of Regional Center for Remote Sensing of North Africa States for his statement. Are there any other delegations wishing to take the floor? I see none. We will therefore continue our consideration of agenda item 9, capacity building in space law, tomorrow morning. Distinguished delegates, I would now like to begin our consideration of agenda item 11, general exchange of information and views on legal mechanisms relating to space debris mitigation and remediation measures, taking into account the work of the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee. The first speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Nigeria, who will speak on behalf of Group 77 and China.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, the Group of 77 and China welcomes the decision of the committee at its 60th session to consider as a single item for discussion on the agenda of the 57th session of this subcommittee. The issue of space debris, its proliferation and removal continue to be a cause for concern in the space environment, which should be a constant reminder of the need to safeguard our global environment from pollution. The group, therefore, is of the view that the potential hazards of accidental collision of debris with space objects and consequences for the contamination of outer space cannot be underestimated. Mr. Chairman, in this regard, the concept of space debris remediation in the form of removal of debris appears to be a good method of preventing such collisions in space. The group understands that there are some contentious issues before the legal subcommittee regarding this matter. Regarding the issue of removal of an object without prior consent or authorization of the state registry, the group believes that it is important for all states to register all space objects launched into outer space as required. On the issue of the definition of space debris, acknowledging that COPUOS is the proper forum on this, the group supports a consultative process involving all members of the committee. With regard to the responsibility of decongesting outer space through remediation, the group encourages countries to take differentiated responsibility for the congestion in the first place, with the spacefaring actors taking the lead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Nigeria for his statement on behalf of Group 77 and China. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Bolivia, who will speak on behalf of GRULAC.
Thank you, Chairman. The expansion of access to space and the ensuing participation of a larger number of stakeholders means that the volume of space debris is also increasing at an alarming rate. This phenomenon endangers the continuity of satellite missions as they are affected through its impact, but it's also a risk for human life, both on Earth as well as on manned space missions. The regulation of the mitigation and reduction of space debris is an absolute necessity to guarantee the long-term sustainability of space activities. GRULAC considers that the guidelines to reduce space debris is a significant step forward and that we need to update it and add to it, taking into account the current practice of states and international organizations who have experience in this field. GRULAC reiterates the need for those who generate the most space debris to be more involved in their removal. They should also provide their scientific and legal knowledge to least developed countries through cooperation agreements so that they can have the necessary safety measures for building space objects and to redirect the non-operational fragments once a space mission has been concluded. GRULAC is convinced that the guidelines on long-term sustainability of outer space will be a complement to the guidelines for the mitigation of space debris. By virtue of the updating clause of the space debris guidelines, GRULAC considers that it is now time to consider updating it without prejudice to the significant contributions that the long-term sustainability working group is making in this field. Thank you, Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Bolivia for his statement on behalf of GRULAC. And the next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Austria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, the constant growth in the amount of space debris is increasingly becoming a challenge for the safe and sustainable conduct of space activities. The mitigation of space debris is therefore a crucial concern for Austria. Consequently, the obligation to mitigate space debris plays an important role in the authorization of national space activities under the Austrian space legislation. According to the Austrian Outer Space Act, in order to obtain authorization, operators must make provision for the mitigation of space debris in accordance with the state-of-the-art and in due consideration of the internationally recognized space debris mitigation guidelines and standards. To this end, operators must submit a report on the measures adopted for the avoidance of debris released during normal operations, for the prevention of on-orbit collisions with other space objects, for the avoidance of on-orbit breakups of the space object, as well as for the removal of the space object from orbit at the end of mission, either by controlled re-entry or by moving the space object to a sufficiently high orbit. For non-maneuverable space objects, an orbit must be chosen where the post-mission lifetime does not exceed 25 years. The nanosatellite Pegasus, which was successfully launched in June 2017 and is the third Austrian satellite in outer space, is the first satellite which underwent an authorization process under the Austrian space legislation. In this regard, the space debris tools developed by the European Space Agency, in particular the MASTER, Meteoroid and Space Debris Terrestrial Environment Reference, and DRAMA, Debris Risk Assessment and Mitigation Analysis tools, were highly useful for the evaluation whether the mission fulfills international space debris mitigation standards, such as the IADC and the COPUOS space debris mitigation guidelines. Moreover, the satellite has been registered according to the Registration Convention, as well as General Assembly Resolution 62/101 on recommendations on enhancing the practice of states and international intergovernmental organizations in registering space objects, and is also tracked by US STRATCOM, which allows other space actors to consider it in their collision avoidance process and to avoid the creation of space debris. In addition to space debris mitigation, the remediation of space debris is also an issue of great importance to Austria. The use of space debris remediation technologies raises several legal concerns that need to be addressed at the international level. These include in particular questions regarding states' jurisdiction and control over space objects they have registered, as well as liability for damage caused as a result of debris remediation operations. We believe that this subcommittee has a crucial role in addressing these issues and therefore support further dialogue on the topic of space debris remediation in the legal subcommittee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Austria for her statement. And the next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Japan.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, on behalf of the Government of Japan, I am pleased to address the 57th session of the Legal Subcommittee of COPUOS regarding Japan's domestic mechanisms for the mitigation of space debris activities. Mr. Chairman, Japan's basic space law, which was established in 2008, stipulates in its general provisions that space development and use shall be carried out with due consideration to its influence on the outer space environment. In November 2016, Japan established the Space Activities Act, an applicable mechanism that covers the space activities of the private sector. The Act specifies that license applicants for satellite operations shall meet required criteria to prevent them from increasing space debris by taking appropriate measures to ensure the proper structure of satellites, to prevent collision with other satellites, and to dispose of satellites under proper conditions. The detailed regulations are provided in related orders. It should be noted that the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, JAXA, established the JAXA Space Debris Mitigation Standards in 1996, and in doing so, JAXA became one of the first space agencies in the world to have developed concrete standards for debris mitigation. In accordance with the UN Space Debris Mitigation Guidelines and the ISO 24113 Space Debris Mitigation Requirements, the current version of the standard requires appropriate management for debris mitigation at each phase of space activities, from satellite design, operation to disposal. Every mission is properly reviewed at the end of each phase of activity in order to ensure compliance with the standard. Mr. Chairman, we recognize that space debris is an urgent issue that must be addressed through the collective efforts of the international community. All states conducting space activities should behave in a responsible manner in order to maintain the safety and the sustainability of outer space activities. From this viewpoint, we would like to encourage all member states operating and launching satellites to properly implement the UN Space Debris Mitigation Guidelines and other related standards to the maximum extent. Thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the distinguished representative of Japan for his statement. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Germany.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, the issue of space debris mitigation and remediation lies at the core of preserving future access to and usability of outer space. As such, it is an important aspect of the long-term sustainable use of outer space, as well as of the safety and security of space operations. Therefore, Germany welcomes the progress of the Working Group on the long-term sustainability of outer space activities in achieving consensus on an additional set of guidelines, including on space debris. The Space Debris Mitigation Guidelines of the Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee, IADC, and the Space Debris Mitigation Guidelines of COPUOS continue to provide valuable guidance during the planning and design of spacecraft and launch vehicles in order to minimize or eliminate generating debris during operations. Also, the Compendium on Space Debris Mitigation Standards adopted by states and international organizations serves as a valuable reference document and enables all interested stakeholders to benefit from access to a comprehensive set of instruments and measures on space debris mitigation. In 2017, Germany, together with ESA, hosted the 7th European Conference on Space Debris. With the amount of space debris orbiting Earth continuously growing, Europe's largest ever conference on space debris concluded that there is an urgent need for coordinated international action to make spaceflight safer. It further concluded that despite progress in technology and in understanding the space environment, there is a need for significantly increasing the pace in applying proposed measures to reduce debris creation. Therefore, Germany believes that a concerted and coherent approach by the legal subcommittee, as well as the scientific and technical subcommittee, is necessary to solve the problem of space debris for the sake of outer space activities. It is crucial that COPUOS develops a common understanding of the normative and regulatory framework that applies to space debris mitigation and remediation measures. Let me highlight just 4 important aspects. First, we need to ensure that space debris mitigation standards reflect current developments such as small satellite activities and mega constellations. Second, we need to ensure that international space debris mitigation standards are appropriately implemented. The current adherence to space debris mitigation guidelines is far from satisfactory. Although IADC research shows a trend towards satisfactory levels of successful reorbiting activities with regard to the geostationary orbit, especially the low Earth orbit region is increasingly crowded as the limit of the orbital lifetime of 25 years is not sufficiently respected. Third, we need to gain clarity on the relationship between international debris mitigation standards and questions of responsibility and liability. And last but not least, we need to address the legal questions related to active removal of space debris. The fact that the LTS working group has not yet been able to achieve consensus on this topic highlights the need to clarify the underlying legal concepts and questions. They concern in particular the definition of space debris, jurisdiction and control over space debris, and the liability for active removal activities. Germany would welcome and support the development of a questionnaire on the legal issues related to active space debris removal. Let me conclude by reiterating that preserving the future access to and usability of outer space is essential to humankind. It is imperative to address the lack of efficient legal mechanisms for implementing space debris mitigation in a timely and efficient manner and through a coherent and common international approach. As this issue is also inherently connected to other agenda items, Germany is convinced that the legal subcommittee is the appropriate forum to address these issues and calls on all COPUOS members to cooperate and commit to the necessary development of international space law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Germany for his statement. The next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of Chile.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chairman. Chile is concerned about the growing amount of space debris being a risk for the safety of space operations and the sustainable use of outer space. In this regard, our delegation would recommend that this subcommittee delve deeper into guidelines for the mitigation of space debris, taking into account the possible generation of space debris from platforms with nuclear power sources and collisions of space objects with space debris. We are particularly concerned for this type of debris in the southern hemisphere, especially in the South Pacific, and we would like to call upon the launching states in voluntary compliance with guidelines to mitigate space debris to adopt measures to control and avoid the generation of space debris. Our delegation believes that the recommendations of the expert group on measures for transparency and trust building, as well as guidelines from the Working Group on Long-Term Sustainability, will contribute to oversight and mitigation of space debris, and that space operations will take place in a safe and sustainable fashion. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Chile for her statement. And the next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Chairperson, distinguished delegates, distinguished colleagues, as you know, France attaches great importance to the long-term viability of outer space. Space debris mitigation is a key challenge of our times. In outer space, a debris item, even a small one, can cause major damage, mostly irreversible damage, and compromise the missions of damaged satellites. Astronaut safety is also affected. And in this connection, we'd like to recall that the International Space Station regularly has to maneuver in order to avoid debris. France is committed to preventing the emergence of space debris, and at this connection, France actively participates in the Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee, IEDC, via our National Centre for Space Studies, which is our national space agency. The work of the IEDC has enabled the drafting and, in 2002, the adoption of guidelines to protect space from artificial space debris. These guidelines were then approved by the United Nations General Assembly. That happened in 2007 under Resolution 62217. And I would like to recall the great importance that my country attaches to those guidelines. Here, France participates in atmospheric re-entry monitoring via the IEDC. Recently, the re-entry of the Tiangong space station was monitored internationally in an international monitoring exercise, and my country committed funds to that. We're also involved in international working groups whose objective is to harmonise the various standards that allow us to limit debris proliferation. France is participating in the drafting of ISO standard 24113 on space debris mitigation. This was adopted in 2011 and is currently being revised. France is of the view that these international mechanisms, although they're not binding, are an initial response to the objective of combating space debris. My delegation would like to welcome the progress in the work of the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee of COPUOS, which, in the context of the working group on the long-term sustainability of space activities, has enabled us to come to a consensus on a preamble and 9 concrete guidelines on strengthening practices to register space objects. This agreement comes alongside the initial 12 guidelines that the member states agreed to in June 2016. France is effectively implementing all of these measures because in 2008 we adopted a law on space operations and relevant technical regulations. This regulatory framework meets international standards and even goes beyond some international standards as of 2020. Technical regulation transitory measures temporary measures will be replaced by this previous aforementioned document. This will have the effect of increasing controlled re-entries. The binding nature of our regulations makes it an effective instrument that will concretely contribute to reducing debris proliferation. We would like to underscore the following major principles. Space objects in low Earth orbit will remain in space for less than 25 years. Geostationary satellites must be placed in regions beyond the protected region once their mission has been completed, and space objects that have reached the end of their life must be removed from orbit. Today, more than 70 orbiting satellites are authorized under the Law on Space Operations, and this will increase in coming years with the increased number of satellite constellations. As we've already mentioned under item 4, France has enhanced its technical regulation so as to strengthen requirements with new substantive technical amendments. The aim is to strengthen the protection of the space environment by avoiding collisions to the extent possible because these generate new debris. By way of conclusion, I'd like to underscore the efforts that we are undertaking in France to give real impact to international measures to reduce space debris. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of France for her statement, and I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Space debris is a major concern in relation to access and use of outer space. International collaboration, discussions, and exchange of information are essential to efficiently address this problem globally. For several years now, UN COPUOS has provided a useful forum to pursue dialogue among space actors on this topic, both within this subcommittee and within the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee. There has also been work done outside the UN, namely within the IADC and the ISO, to develop useful standards and guidelines. Canada supports the development of non-binding international principles, standards, and guidelines to address space debris mitigation. Canada also fully endorses continued cooperation and coordination between operational actors to advance best practices in spaceflight safety and risk mitigation. Canada also acknowledges the important work of the United States Strategic Command in the tracking of space objects and dissemination of essential conjunction data messages to satellite operators. Impacts and collisions involving space debris can present a challenge to the current legal regime applicable to liability and responsibility set out in the treaties. While it is important not to attempt to alter or reinterpret the law as established by the treaties, it would be beneficial to discuss how the current legal regime can be best understood and applied in situations involving debris-producing on-orbit collisions. Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, there is an increasingly held view that it will be necessary to supplement mitigation efforts with removal or remediation measures, as mitigation alone will be insufficient to adequately address space debris. In addition to the technical challenges, any attempt to remove a space object in orbit raises issues of jurisdiction and control, as well as responsibility and liability. The legal subcommittee can make a beneficial contribution to the peaceful use and exploration of outer space by engaging in a discussion on the application and advancement of these legal concepts to encourage and facilitate remediation activities. While technological capabilities in this area have come a long way, these need to be complemented by clear legal guidance to ensure confidence in long-term spaceflight safety and compliance with all existing treaties. The Canadian delegation believes this is feasible without trying to redefine or reinterpret jurisdiction, control, responsibility, or liability in the core United Nations treaties on outer space. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the distinguished representative of Canada for her statement. We have completed the list of speakers for this agenda item. Are there any other delegations wishing to take the floor? I see none. We will therefore continue our consideration of agenda item 11 on space debris mitigation and remediation tomorrow morning. Distinguished delegates, I will shortly adjourn this meeting, but before I would like to inform you of our schedule of work for tomorrow morning. We will meet promptly at 10 a.m. At that time, we will continue our consideration of agenda item 8, national legislation relevant to the peaceful exploration and use of outer space, agenda item 9, capacity building in space law, and agenda item 11, general exchange of information and views on legal mechanisms relating to space debris mitigation and remediation measures, taking into account the work of the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee. After the adjournment of the plenary tomorrow, the working group on the status and application of the 5 United Nations treaties on outer space will hold its 9th meeting. At 1 p.m. tomorrow, during lunchtime, there will be one technical presentation by Ms. Michelle Hanlon from the National Space Society entitled The 18th Sustainable Development Goal, Recognizing the Imperative Role of Space in Our Future. Are there any questions or comments to the proposed schedule? I see none. I now invite the chair of the working group on the status and application of the 5 United Nations treaties on outer space to hold the 8th meeting of the working group. This meeting is adjourned until tomorrow 10 a.m.
Thank you.